ANC Secretary-General Fikile Mbalula has confirmed that veteran Mavuso Msimang has now withdrawn his resignation from the organization. Msimang quit last week after more than 60 years in the ANC, citing what he said was endemic corruption within its ranks. He met with Mbalula to discuss the public nature of his resignation. The Secretary-General subsequently accused Msimang of accepting a bribe from businessman Roger Jardine, who recently announced he was launching a political movement called Change Starts Now. Well, the ANC in a statement today says Mbalula has apologized for those reports, or remarks rather. He's also vowed to urgently address concerns over unethical behavior and ill discipline within the governing party.
Under the facilitation of the Veterans League, the NCSG and Comrade Mavuso Msimang met to address the manner in which the resignation letter by Comrade Msimang was managed. The NCSG expressed the ANC's commitment to taking the ANC forward on a path of renewal. The ANC will continuously seek the wise counsel of the elders of the ANC, in whose footsteps we walk. Comrade Msimang has withdrawn his resignation, remaining a member of the organization he has belonged to for 60 years, and will continue to speak up against any malfeasance impacting the interests of society. The SG regrets the comments he made that impugned on the integrity of Comrade Msimang. Commitment to transformation proceeds, and this matter is now laid to rest.
Let's talk more about that story. Bring in political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze. Very good evening to you, Professor. Good to have your time. Is this a climb down by the ANC?
Well, I think it will be interpreted in different ways. From the ANC itself, they will see it as coming back to the fold of Mr. Mavuso Msimang. I think from the outside the ANC, they will say, well, this is a bit of a compromise that he agreed on, and it is therefore very unfortunate from that perspective. So it really depends. The ANC will say, well, we came to an agreement. There's now a new understanding. We will allow him, as I understand from the statement, that they will allow him to still speak out, to be critical of the situation within the ANC. But his resignation is withdrawn. He was under tremendous pressure from the Secretary General, even from the President of the Youth League, that said, well, he's losing his credentials within the ANC. So I think that all added up to the point where he is now. But I think the public perspective will be more complex. What will be the understanding of it? Many people will be critical of the fact that he actually withdrew his resignation. I think from my point of view, I think he made his point already. He made public his criticism of the ANC. I think everyone, whether he is back in the ANC or not, will know that he is uncomfortable with the current situation. He is very critical of it. And I think that made a very important impact on the public discourse, irrespective whether he's back in the ANC or not.
But is there a real reason for Mavuso Msimang or anyone who shares the same sentiment that he does within the ANC about the party, that what we've heard today will bring about any real change? For example, the party says in its statement, I'm paraphrasing here, that what's going to happen now, for example, is that people who are implicated in allegations of state capture, those who've been linked to other scandals as well, will not be on the lists for deployment to the various legislatures post next year's elections. But can that really be done on a promise basically made seemingly to one man?
Well, I think he is more than just one person. It represents a very particular view coming from the Veterans League, which is for the ANC collectively speaking very important. And that it comes from within the ANC, I think, is even more significant. If you or I said that, it will not have the same impact as coming from him. So I think that the fact that it has received such a wide public platform means that it is known to anyone who is watching what is happening. And I think this is for the ANC the real hurt or the real impact that it felt by his resignation. I think what we have seen now today might reduce that impact to some extent, especially within the ANC, but from a public perspective, from outside the ANC, I think what he mentioned, what he said, what is included in his statement will remain in the public domain. And it will be used also in the coming months in the election campaigns by the different parties, most definitely, as evidence of what are the feelings of senior persons in the ANC.
So Mavuso Msimang is coming back to the ANC based on this commitment that he's been given by his movement that it will do more, do better, if you will, to deal with unethical and corrupt conduct. Does it also now become his responsibility to ensure that the party keeps its word going into election season?
I suppose so, yes. I suppose so. It's a mutual agreement, I would say, or a mutual understanding. And if one of the sides are not complying with it, especially on the side of the ANC, then I think he will be justified to say, well, the promise was not kept, and therefore I can go back on this. But it's unlikely that it will happen. I think it's very seldom that you can do it twice and that it will still have the same impact. So in this case, he already exercised this first choice that he had. And therefore there's actually not going to be for him another chance to this, in my view. And therefore, one obviously cannot expect to say, well, they will immediately start to act on this. This is not in the nature of the ANC. It's much bigger processes that are very comprehensive processes. Some of them we will only see during the course of next year, for example, during the time of the nominations, whether they will keep to these commitments that they have made. But I think by then, this would have been to some extent much less prominent than where we are at the moment. And it will not play the same role as it has played now in terms of the impact that it made on the internal dynamics of the ANC.
How much of a precedent or an expectation do you think it will set in the event that there are future standoffs, shall we say, or episodes involving other senior members of the party who may be complaining about the same thing? Will the ANC actually fight as hard for any other people who may act in the same way to return to the fold?
I'm not sure about that. I think he is a relatively special person. The status that he has within the ANC is the Deputy President of the Veterans League. He was the private secretary of the President of the ANC, Oliver Tambo. He was in very senior positions of government. So the combination, the package that he represents has a very strong impact on the public discourse, the public domain in general. So there are very few people, even within the ANC, that has this type of status. So I think in his case, it is a special case, and therefore it made the impact that we've seen now. Many others might resign, and it simply won't have the same impact.
Here's where I'm going with that question then, and your response, Professor Kotze. The rumor mill from about this morning, quite busy, if you will, with expectations and now a statement floating about that the former ANC president, Jacob Zuma, will this coming weekend on Saturday make some sort of significant announcement about his future, some suggesting he may in fact be leaving the ANC to join another organization that's already been registered with the IEC. How do you think the party will navigate around that if that is what comes to pass on Saturday?
Well, I think the ANC will have a similar response. It's very difficult to disregard the former president of the ANC or the national president, whether you like President Zuma or not. He was a very important person in the ANC. He still plays an important role, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, not so much on a general or national level anymore. But for him to leave the ANC will certainly make a negative impact in the eyes of many people within the ANC. So they will try to avoid that at all costs. I mean, there was even some talk that he will lead the ANC's campaign for next year's election, specifically in KwaZulu-Natal.
And would they be poorer without Zuma? Pardon me, Professor, would they be poorer, the ANC, without former President Zuma, especially in an area like KwaZulu-Natal, at a time when the party is having to deal with predictions, forecasts that it may see its worst electoral showing?
Well, again, I think, yes, in some instances it will. Even in KwaZulu-Natal, it's clear that there are different views, there are different sort of focus areas or different sentiments amongst the ANC within KwaZulu-Natal. So it's not an homogeneous province where everyone thinks the same about him, for example, or about the current provincial leadership, which is also under pressure. So for some people, certainly, yes, it will be regarded as a loss. While for other people, they will possibly say, well, we need to renew the leadership within KwaZulu-Natal, the ANC's leadership. And that is why the lack of that is why they have lost so much votes and support in the province. So he is very much a contested figure. There's certainly not consensus about him, even in KwaZulu-Natal. But there are certainly people who will say, well, they can't afford to lose him. Especially just from a sort of a symbolic point of view, is that it's very difficult to manage the loss of a former president of any political organization.
Professor Dirk Kotze, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for your time tonight.